Are there any day-old muffins? The ones you'd usually throw out? The woman's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried across the small bakery like a confession. She stood at the counter with her daughter pressed against her hip, a girl no older than 6, in a coat 2 sizes too big with the sleeves rolled up at the cuffs. The girl stared at the pastry case the way children stare at aquariums. Motionless, enchanted, afraid that looking away might make the beautiful thing vanish. Teenager behind the register popped her gum. "We don't really do that. I just thought, sometimes bakeries sell things at a discount at the end of the day. It's my daughter's birthday, and It's 10 in the morning, the girl said, not unkind, but not gentle either. Everything's fresh. A man in line behind them shifted his weight. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a canvas work jacket with wood shavings still caught in the collar. Boy stood beside him, holding a small sketch pad, pencil tucked behind his ear like a carpenter in miniature. The man had been studying the menu board, but he wasn't studying it anymore. Before we go any further, if stories about real people and quiet kindness mean something to you, think about subscribing to our channel. We tell stories about the moments most people walk past without noticing, the ones that matter most. Now, let's get back to this bakery. The woman, Joelle Thibault, though no one in the shop knew her name, touched her daughter's hair and turned to leave. Her jaw was set the way jaws set when someone is trying very hard not to cry in public. She had $19 in her account. She had checked on her phone in the parking lot before walking in, already knowing it wouldn't be enough for a real cake, but hoping that maybe, just maybe, there was something small and slightly stale that could pass for a birthday treat. "Excuse me." The man's voice was calm, the kind of calm that came from practice rather than nature. "I'll take that carrot cake in the case, the whole one, and add a box of whatever muffins she was asking about." Joelle turned sharply. "That's not necessary. Didn't say it was necessary." He met her eyes with no trace of pity, no performance of generosity, nothing that suggested he expected gratitude. "I said I'll take them." 2 separate things. His son tugged his sleeve and whispered something. The man nodded, a faint warmth crossing his face. "Is it really your birthday?" the boy asked the girl directly. The girl looked up at her mother for permission, then nodded. "How old?" "6. I'm 8, the boy said with quiet authority. "I know how to draw foxes. I could show you if you want. They're harder than dogs, but easier than horses." The girl's face changed, not dramatically. Children don't transform the way adults imagine they do. But something softened behind her eyes. Something that had been braced for disappointment, relaxed by a single degree. Joelle watched her daughter's face and felt the fight drain out of her like water through a cracked cup. She looked at the man again, searching for condescension, for the quiet superiority that sometimes hides behind generosity. She found nothing except a kind of recognition, as though he understood, not in theory but in practice, what it cost her to stand in this bakery with $19 and a daughter turning 6. "There's a park on Division Street," he offered. "Benches, big maple tree. The kids could eat cake there if that's all right with you." Joelle hesitated. 5 years of raising a daughter alone had taught her to refuse things. Refusal was safe. Refusal was dignified. Refusal kept you from owing anyone anything, and that was important when the people you owed things to had a habit of disappearing. But her daughter was looking up at her with those wide, careful eyes, and the boy was already showing her a small, carved wooden fox he had pulled from his jacket pocket, and the morning sun was pouring through the bakery window in a way that made everything look briefly, impossibly, like it might be okay. "Just for the cake," Joelle said. "Then we have to go. Just for the cake," the man agreed. His name was Owen. She learned this during the walk to the park, the children running ahead while the adults kept a careful distance from each other. He didn't volunteer much. Joelle didn't ask, but she noticed things. The wedding band he still wore on his left hand. The way he watched his son with a tenderness laced through with something heavier, the deliberate way he spoke, as though words were a material he had learned to measure twice. The park was small, just a patch of green with a wooden bench, and an old maple that had survived every ice storm the city had thrown at it. Owen stopped at a convenience store and came back with birthday candles and paper plates. When Joelle started to object, he said simply, "Can't have a birthday without candles? That's just a Tuesday." They sat on the bench while the children settled cross-legged on the grass, the carrot cake between them like a treaty. Owen lit 6 candles and placed them in the frosting with a carpenter's precision. "Make a wish," he told the girl. Joelle Thibault closed her eyes so tightly, her whole face crumpled. Her lips moved silently. Then she opened her eyes and blew out every candle in one breath. "What'd you wish for?" the boy asked. "Can't say? Then it doesn't work." The boy, Emmett, nodded with the gravity of someone who understood the binding nature of birthday law. As the children ate cake, laughing at the frosting on each other's noses, Joelle sat in a stillness she hadn't felt in years. The autumn sun came through the maple leaves and made the grass glow copper and gold. For a few minutes, she let herself pretend this was ordinary. That she wasn't behind on rent. That she hadn't been turned down for the second waitressing shift she'd applied for. That her daughter could have cake and candles and a friend whenever she wanted. Owen sat beside her without speaking. He seemed comfortable with silence in a way that most people aren't. Not as avoidance, but as a kind of respect for what words couldn't quite reach. "You didn't have to do any of this," Joelle said at last. "I know. Then why?" Owen watched Emmett showing Chloe how to fold a napkin into a bird. The boy was patient, guiding her small fingers through each crease. "My wife used to keep a jar on our kitchen counter," he said. "Every time something good happened, even small things, a nice sunset, a stranger holding a door, she'd write it on a slip of paper and put it in the jar. She called it the evidence file, proof that the world wasn't as bad as the news made it seem." He paused. "She was better at that than I'll ever be. But I try." Joelle noticed the past tense. She noticed the slight tightening around his eyes. She didn't ask. "Emmett hasn't talked to another kid like that in a long time," Owen continued, his voice lower now. "Not since his mom passed. 2 years, and he still keeps most things locked up inside." Joelle looked at the 2 children. Emmett was laughing at something Chloe had said, a real laugh, startled out of him like a bird flushed from a hedge. "Chloe's the same," she admitted. "She never complains, never asks for things. 6 years old and already figuring out which questions will make me sad so she can avoid them." Owen turned to look at her, and Joelle felt exposed, not judged but seen, which was somehow harder. "She has a good mother," he said simply. Joelle wanted to argue. She wanted to list every bill she couldn't pay, every permission slip she'd signed late, every morning she'd sent Chloe to school with crackers instead of a proper lunch, because payday was still 2 days away. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she watched her daughter eat birthday cake in a park in Kingston, with a boy who drew foxes and a man who carried his dead wife's kindness like a lantern. When the cake was gone and the light began to change, Joelle stood and brushed crumbs from her jeans. "We should get going, thank you. For all of it. Can we see them again?" Chloe asked, tugging at Joelle's sleeve. "Emmett said he'd teach me how to draw a wolf next." Joelle glanced at Owen, uncertain. He pulled out his phone. No pressure at all. "But Emmett goes to Sir John A. Macdonald Public School. If Chloe ever wants that drawing lesson." Joelle recognized the school. It was the same one Chloe attended, different grade, different entrance, different pickup time. How had she never seen them before? "We'll see," she said. The phrase she used when she meant no but couldn't bear to say it. As they walked away, Chloe chattering about foxes and napkin birds and her new friend Emmett, Joelle realized she didn't want to say no. For the first time in 5 years, she had met someone who didn't make her feel small or pitied or insufficient. She had felt something she had almost forgotten was possible. Behind them, Owen watched the mother and daughter disappear around the corner. Emmett tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, can we see them again?" Owen looked down at his son, at the brightness in his eyes that had been absent for 2 long years. "We'll see," he said, but unlike Joelle, when Owen said it, he meant yes. 9 days passed. Joelle told herself it was a one-time thing. She even changed the route she walked to the bus stop, avoiding the bakery, as though the building itself might remind her of things she couldn't afford to feel. The Kingston Frontenac Public Library was free, which made it one of Chloe's favorite places. Joelle took her there every Wednesday evening, after the lunch shift at the diner, before the night cleaning job at the office tower on Princess Street. 2 hours of warmth and quiet while Chloe explored the picture books and Joelle rested her feet. That Wednesday, Chloe spotted Emmett before Joelle even noticed they weren't alone. "Mommy! It's Emmett!" The boy looked up from a graphic novel and his face broke open. "Hey, birthday girl." Joelle's stomach dropped and lifted at the same time. She scanned the room and found Owen at a nearby table, a stack of woodworking magazines in front of him. Reading glasses perched on his nose. He raised a hand, half wave, half apology, looking almost as surprised as she felt. The children were already sitting together, Emmett pulling out his sketch pad. Joelle had no choice but to walk over. "Small world," she said. "Small city," Owen replied. "Emmett likes it here. Says books are quieter than people." Joelle almost smiled. She understood exactly what the boy meant. They sat across from each other, pretending to read, but every few minutes their eyes drifted to the children, watching Emmett carefully teach Chloe how to shade fur with the side of a pencil. "She talks about him," Joelle admitted quietly. "Every single day. Emmett this, Emmett that. She's decided he's her best friend. She didn't consult him about it, but that's Chloe." Owen's mouth twitched. "Emmett's the same. First time he's wanted to talk about anyone since." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. The hour passed impossibly fast. When it was time to leave, Chloe begged for 5 more minutes, then 10. Joelle finally promised they'd come back next Wednesday, just to get her out the door. At the exit, Owen caught up. "Joelle," he said her name carefully, as though testing whether he had the right. "I meant what I said about the school. If Chloe ever needs someone to walk her to the after-school program, Emmett's there too. No trouble." Joelle wanted to refuse. She wanted to keep the walls intact, but she looked at Chloe, who was waving goodbye to Emmett with both hands, fingers spread wide, maximum enthusiasm, and she heard herself say, "We'll see." This time she almost meant yes. 2 weeks later, Joelle discovered what she probably should have realized sooner. Standing outside the school gates on a rare afternoon off, she spotted Owen leaning against a gray pickup truck, tool belt still on, sawdust freckling his forearms. "We have to stop running into each other," he said. "Are you following me? Pretty sure I was here first?" Joelle laughed. A small, rusty sound, the laugh of someone who hadn't used it in a while and was surprised to find it still worked. The bell rang. Children poured out. Joelle searched for Chloe's red backpack, the same one from junior kindergarten because new backpacks cost money Joelle didn't have, and found her walking hand in hand with Emmett. "Mom!" Chloe ran over, dragging Emmett behind her. "Emmett made me something. Look." She held up a small wooden fox, no bigger than her palm, carved with surprising detail for a child's work. Joelle recognized the shape. It was the same one Emmett had shown Chloe in the bakery that first day. "Emmett, this is yours," Joelle said gently. "You should keep it." The boy shrugged, studying his shoes. "I can make more. Dad's teaching me." And Chloe said she never had a fox before. Not a real one or a wooden one. Joelle looked at Owen, who seemed just as caught off guard. "He's never given that to anyone," Owen said quietly. "His mom carved the original. Taught Emmett to make copies last summer before." The sentence dissolved. The weight of the small fox in Chloe's hand suddenly felt enormous. Joelle knelt to Emmett's level. "Thank you," she said softly. "We'll take the very best care of it." Emmett nodded, then looked up at his father. "Dad, can Chloe come see the workshop? I want to show her the lathe." Owen hesitated, glancing at Joelle. She could see him weighing the risk of letting someone new into their world. The world he and Emmett had built around their grief like a fence around a garden. "Maybe someday," Owen said, "if her mom's okay with it." Joelle felt the old reflex. No, keep it simple, keep it safe. But Chloe was looking at her with those eyes, the same eyes that had stared at the pastry case in the bakery, full of hope braced for refusal. "Maybe someday," Joelle echoed, and for the first time she actually meant it. The maybe became a yes 3 weeks later, on a day that nearly destroyed everything. Joelle arrived at the school to find Chloe wasn't there. The after-school coordinator explained a little sheepish that Chloe had been picked up by Emmett's father an hour ago. He said you knew. The freezing rain advisory, he didn't want the kids standing outside. Joelle's blood went cold. She didn't have Owen's number. She didn't know his last name. Wait, she did, Atchison. He'd mentioned it once. But she didn't know where his workshop was, only that it was somewhere near the old woolen mill on Catahawkee Street. She drove there through the ice, wipers scraping, handshaking, her mind cataloging every worst-case scenario she'd spent 5 years training herself to imagine. Through the frosted window of a small workshop, she saw Chloe. Perfectly safe, sitting at a workbench beside Emmett while Owen showed them how to sand a piece of maple smooth. Joelle burst through the door, soaked and shaking. Chloe. Her daughter looked up, confused by the panic. "Mommy, Mr. Owen said the school was going to call you." Owen was already on his feet, hands raised. "Joelle, I'm sorry. I told them to phone you. The roads were getting bad and I didn't want. You should have asked me first." Her voice was thin and sharp, a wire pulled too tight. "You're right. I'm sorry." The anger drained out of her as suddenly as it had come. Chloe was safe. Chloe was warm. Chloe was looking at her with worried eyes, afraid she'd ruined something. "It's okay, baby," Joelle said, pulling Chloe against her damp coat. "I just didn't know where you were." Owen handed her a towel. "Let me put the kettle on. You're frozen." She wanted to refuse, but she was cold and exhausted, and Chloe was already asking if they could stay a little longer because Emmett was teaching her to make a birdhouse. "Just until the roads clear," Joelle said. The roads didn't clear for 2 hours. The ice kept falling, ticking against the workshop windows like a clock winding down. In that time, Joelle learned that Owen had built every shelf, every workbench, every tool rack in the shop himself. She learned that his wife, Diane, had been the one who pushed him to leave his government desk job and open the woodworking business. That she had believed in his hands before he did. She learned that Owen blamed himself, even though the accident wasn't his fault. "Black ice on the 401, he said, staring at his tea. "Transport truck jackknifed. We were in the wrong lane at the wrong second. She was in the passenger seat. Owen, if I'd left 5 minutes later. If I'd taken the 2 instead of the highway. You can't do that to yourself." "I know, but I do it anyway." Joelle understood that kind of arithmetic. She carried her own version, the belief that she should have seen who Chloe's father really was before it was too late. That she should have been smarter, less trusting, less willing to believe someone who said, "I love you," while meaning, "I love the idea of you," until something easier comes along. "Chloe's dead left when she was 11 months old," Joelle heard herself say. She hadn't planned to. But the warm workshop and the ice outside and the sound of children laughing in the next room made it easier to speak. He said he wasn't built for this. Left a note on the kitchen table like he was canceling a subscription. Haven't heard from him since. Owen looked at her steadily. "He was wrong. You don't know that. I know your daughter is brave and kind and funny. Kids don't end up like that by accident. Someone teaches them. Someone shows up every single day, even when it's hard." Joelle blinked hard. She had not cried in front of another adult in 5 years, and she was not going to start now. She blinked again and looked at the ceiling and breathed. "Joelle," Owen said softly, "I don't think either of us needs rescuing, but maybe we can stop pretending we have to do everything alone." Before she could answer, Chloe came running in with a lopsided birdhouse, glue still wet, one wall slightly crooked but standing. "Mommy, look, I built this. Emmett helped with the roof, but the rest is me." Joelle took the birdhouse and turned it over like it was made of crystal. "It's perfect, baby, the most perfect birdhouse I've ever seen." Chloe beamed. Behind her, Emmett stood in the doorway with sawdust in his hair and a quiet contentment in his face that Owen hadn't seen in 2 years. For one long moment, the 4 of them existed together in the warm glow of the workshop, while ice tapped against the glass. 2 fractured families, sheltering in each other without meaning to. But Joelle knew better than to trust moments like these. She had learned the hard way that warmth always cools. She started pulling away after that. Not obviously, declined invitation here, a schedule change there. She stopped going to the library on Wednesdays. She started picking up Chloe before the after-school program ended to avoid the chance of running into Owen. Chloe noticed. Of course she noticed. "When can we see Emmett?" "Soon, sweetie." "You always say that." Joelle had no answer that wouldn't break her daughter's heart, so she said nothing. She told herself she was being wise. She told herself that attachment was just another word for future grief. She told herself that Owen was a good man who deserved someone whole, someone who didn't flinch at kindness because she'd been taught that kindness always came with conditions. But at night, when Chloe was asleep and the apartment was dark, Joelle would hold the small wooden fox and turn it over in her hands. She would think about Owen's workshop, about the evidence jar his wife had kept, about the way he looked at her as if she were worth something. Maybe we can stop pretending we have to do everything alone, but what if she let him in and he saw the truth? That some mornings the only reason she got out of bed was Chloe's face. That she owned nothing, Cass. That she was held together with duct tape and stubbornness, and the desperate hope that her daughter would never know how close to the edge they lived. Better to stop now, before it became something that could shatter her. A week later, Joelle went to Owen's workshop to pick up a scarf Chloe had left behind. Quick errand. Grab the scarf, say thank you, leave. But through the open window, she heard Owen's voice. He was on the phone, his back to the door. "Yeah, she's had it rough. The kid, too. I just want to help them find their footing, you know." "Get them." Joelle froze. "Help them find their footing." The words rearranged themselves in her mind, twisting into something sharp and familiar. All this time she had let herself believe, foolishly, dangerously, that this was something between equals, that Owen saw her as a person, not a project. But she was wrong. She was just another broken thing for the carpenter to repair. The old wound split open. Suddenly, she was back in her apartment 5 years ago, reading the note on the kitchen table. "I'm not built for this." She grabbed Chloe's scarf from the hook by the door, and her elbow caught a clamp on the workbench. It clattered to the floor. Owen spun around. "Joelle, I didn't hear you." She couldn't look at him. If she looked at him, she would cry, and she would not give anyone that power ever again. "Just came for the scarf." "Thank you for everything, Owen, but we're fine on our own." "We always have been, Joelle. Wait, what happened?" "Goodbye." She walked into the November air and didn't look back. Owen called her name twice. She kept walking. He came to her building once. She saw the gray truck through the window and stayed behind the curtain until it left. Chloe stopped asking about Emmett. Instead, she grew quiet. She spent hours with her crayons, drawing the same thing over and over. A house with 4 people in front of it. A woman, a man, a girl, and a boy. Joelle found her one night sitting cross-legged on her bed, staring at the drawing. At the bottom, in Chloe's careful printing, 2 words, "My family." "Baby," Joelle whispered, sitting beside her. "What's this?" "Nothing." Chloe folded the paper quickly and shoved it under her pillow. "Just a picture." Joelle felt something inside her crack clean in half. She wanted to explain. She wanted to say that she was protecting them both, that loving people only led to losing them, that it was safer to be alone than to be left behind again. But how do you say that to a 6-year-old who has never once asked for anything except not to be lonely? That night after Chloe fell asleep, clutching the wooden fox, Joelle sat on the kitchen floor in the dark and cried for the first time in 5 years. Across the city, Emmett sat at the kitchen table, his sketchpad closed in front of him. He hadn't drawn anything in 8 days. The colored pencils Owen had bought him gathered dust. "You should eat, Em." Owen set a plate of pasta in front of his son. Emmett pushed it away. "Not hungry." "Em, why did they stop coming, Dad?" Owen had no answer. He had replayed his last conversation with Joelle 100 times, examining it from every angle the way he'd examine a piece of wood for hidden cracks. One moment everything had been fine, and the next she was looking at him like he'd betrayed her. "I don't know, Bud. Did I do something?" "No." Owen knelt beside Emmett's chair and took his son's hands. No, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups have problems that don't make sense to kids. That's never your fault. Emmett was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that hit Owen harder than anything had since the hospital. Dad, I miss them, and I think Mom would want you to be happy. Owen felt the words land in his chest like a hammer strike. For 2 years he had been so consumed with shielding Emmett from more loss that he hadn't noticed his son watching him drown. Diane's voice surfaced in his memory. The last clear thing she'd said, her hand cold in his, the hospital lights too bright. Take care of our boy. He had thought that meant keeping Emmett safe, keeping the world small enough that nothing could hurt him again. But maybe it meant something else. Maybe it meant teaching his son that the world was worth engaging with, even after it had taken something irreplaceable. Emmett reached into his backpack and pulled out his sketch pad. He opened to a page Owen hadn't seen. 5 figures standing together, Owen, Emmett, Joelle, Chloe, and above them all, floating in a sky full of stars, a woman with wings and a gentle smile. That's Mom, Emmett said, pointing. She's watching. She'll keep us all safe. Owen stared at the drawing for a long time. His 8-year-old son had done what Owen could not. He had found a way to move forward without leaving Diane behind. I need to fix this, Owen said quietly. How? Owen looked at his boy, at the hope still burning in those dark eyes despite everything. I'm going to tell her the truth. He grabbed his keys and walked out into the night. The knock came at 10:30. Joelle sat frozen on the couch, eyes still swollen. She knew who it was before she checked the peephole. Only one person would show up at her door this late with that particular knock, unhurried but certain. Joelle. Owen's voice, muffled through the wood. Please. 5 minutes. She pressed her forehead against the door. Every rational cell in her body told her to stay put. Keep the door between them. Protect yourself the way you've learned to. But her hand was already turning the lock. She stepped into the hallway, pulling the door mostly shut behind her. Owen stood under the fluorescent light, still in his work jacket, looking like he hadn't slept in days. I know what you heard, he said without preamble. I don't need your charity, Owen. Charity? The word genuinely confused him. Joelle, is that what you think this is? I heard you on the phone, helping us find our footing, like we're a project, like we're something to fix. Owen ran a hand over his face, exhaustion and frustration written in every line. You didn't hear the whole call. I heard enough. No, you didn't. He took a step closer, and Joelle made herself hold her ground. You heard me say I wanted to help you. You didn't hear what I said next. Joelle crossed her arms, a barrier, a shield, the last wall she had. Then tell me. Owen looked at her for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was different, quieter, more exposed. Like a man removing armor piece by piece. I said I wanted to help you find your footing, and then I said, but honestly, they're the ones helping me. I told my brother that Emmett smiles again because of your daughter, that I feel like I can breathe again when you're in the room. That I haven't felt that since Diane. The words hung in the hallway, heavy and unprotected. I'm not here to fix you, Joelle. Owen's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. I was never here to fix you. I'm here because you fixed something in me I didn't even know was still broken. You and Chloe, you reminded me that it's okay to live again. Not just survive. Live. Joelle felt the walls she had spent 5 years building begin to fracture. How do I know you won't leave? The question came out small and terrified, and full of every fear she'd been carrying since the kitchen table note. You don't, Owen said honestly. I can't promise forever. Nobody alive can do that. But I can promise I'm not going anywhere by choice, and I can promise that whatever comes, I'll face it beside you instead of running from it. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, creased and softened at the edges from years of handling. This is Diane, he said. I keep her in my pocket every day. Not because I'm stuck, because she reminds me what matters. Joelle looked at the photo. A woman with warm brown eyes and a smile that Joelle could see unmistakably in Emmett's face. The last thing she said was about Emmett. Owen continued, take care of our boy. For 2 years, I thought that meant protecting him from pain, keeping everything small and safe. But Emmett showed me something tonight. What? He drew a picture. All four of us, me, him, you, Chloe, and above us he drew Diane with wings, watching over everyone. Owen took a shaky breath. My 8-year-old son understood something I've been too afraid to see. Taking care of him doesn't mean hiding from life. It means showing him that love is worth it, even when it's terrifying. Joelle felt tears running down her face and didn't try to stop them. I'm scared, Owen. What if I'm not enough? Then we figure it out together. That's how it works. He reached out slowly, giving her space to step back. She didn't step back. He took her hand, warm, calloused, steady. You're not a burden, Joelle. You never were. You never will be. Something inside her finally let go. The fear didn't vanish. She wasn't sure it ever would completely. But for the first time in 5 years, it wasn't the only voice in the room. She stepped forward and let Owen hold her while she cried. Not tears of grief, tears of release, of something that felt dangerously, wonderfully, terrifyingly like hope. The next morning, Owen brought Emmett to see Chloe. The two children spotted each other across the apartment parking lot and ran. They collided in a hug so fierce that Emmett's sketchpad went flying, pages scattering across the wet pavement. I missed you, Chloe said into his shoulder. I drew you something. Emmett pulled back and scrambled to collect the fallen pages. He found the one he wanted and handed it to her with both hands, the way you hand someone something precious. Chloe studied the drawing, 4 figures holding hands in front of a house. Above them, a woman with wings and stars around her, smiling down. Who's that? Chloe asked, pointing at the figure in the sky. My mom, Emmett said simply. She's watching us. She'll keep everyone safe. Chloe looked at the drawing for a long, serious moment. Then she looked at Emmett with the absolute gravity that only a 6-year-old can muster. I'll keep it forever, she promised. Joelle and Owen stood nearby, watching their children close the distance that the adults had been too frightened to cross. Joelle felt Owen's hand find hers, and she didn't pull away. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure it out, Owen said, one day at a time. It wasn't a fairy tale answer. No grand declaration, no promise that everything would be perfect. But it was honest, and after 5 years of broken promises, honesty was the most valuable thing anyone could offer her. Toad. The months that followed weren't easy, but they were good. Chloe started spending afternoons in Owen's workshop learning to measure and sand and build. She made a second birdhouse, then a third, each one straighter than the last. The first one, the lopsided one from the ice storm, sat on her nightstand, holding the small wooden fox Emmett had given her. Joelle began to trust the happiness she felt. It didn't come naturally. Some nights she still lay awake, braced for the sound of everything collapsing. But morning would come, and Owen would still be there, and Emmett would still be teaching Chloe to draw wolves and foxes and the occasional lopsided horse. And the world kept turning. She started sewing again. Alterations at first, then simple dresses and quilted bags she sold at the Memorial Center Craft Market on weekends. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Piece of herself she had packed away the day Chloe's father left, finally allowed back into the light. Owen framed Emmett's drawing and hung it in the workshop, right above the workbench. Customers sometimes asked about it. Owen would glance at it and say, "That's my family." 1 year later, on Chloe's 7th birthday, there was no bakery, no day-old muffins. Instead, there was Owen's kitchen, warm and golden with November light. Emmett and Owen had spent the morning baking a carrot cake from scratch, lopsided, frosting uneven, but topped with a small carved wooden fox and 7 candles. Chloe sat at the head of the table in a purple dress Joelle had sewn herself. Emmett sat beside her, guarding a wrapped gift he'd been carrying around all day. Owen lit the candles while Joelle watched from across the table, her heart so full it ached. "Make a wish," Owen said. Chloe closed her eyes, her face scrunched the same way it had been a year ago in that park under the maple tree. But when she opened them, she didn't blow. "I don't need to wish," she said. Joelle leaned forward. "Why not, baby?" Chloe looked around the table, at Emmett, who had become the brother she'd never had, at Owen, who had shown her what fathers were supposed to be, at her mother, who was smiling again. Really smiling. Because everything I'd wish for is already here." She blew out the candles in one breath, and the kitchen filled with cheering. Later that night, after the cake was eaten and the presents unwrapped, and the children had fallen asleep on the couch, in a heap of blankets and contentment, Joelle stood at the window, looking out at the first snow of the season falling over Kingston. Owen came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Joelle leaned back against his chest. Behind them on the workshop wall, Emmett's drawing watched over everything. 4 people, 1 angel, a sky full of stars. "I was thinking about that morning at the bakery," she said, "when I asked for day-old muffins. What about it?" Joelle turned to look at him, and in her eyes was something that had been missing for a very long time. "Peace. I thought that was what we deserved. Something left over, something nobody else wanted, but you saw us differently." She reached up and touched his face. "You reminded me that we were worth more than our worst days." Owen pressed his forehead to hers. "We reminded each other." Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and steady, blanketing the city in white. But inside, the house was warm and the children were safe. And 2 people, who had been cracked open by life, had found a way. Not to fix each other, because that was never the point, but to sit together in the broken places and let the light come through. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If Joelle's journey stirred something in you, maybe it's because we all carry pieces of her inside us. The fear of not being enough. The walls we build because we've been hurt, and somewhere underneath it all, the stubborn hope that someone will see us, really see us, and stay. Sometimes love doesn't arrive to save us. It arrives to remind us that we were never supposed to carry everything alone. If this story moved you, share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Dennis's Stories so you don't miss the next one. We tell stories about ordinary people, quiet courage, and the small moments that change everything. Until next time, remember, you are worth more than your worst days.